Good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. We want to welcome you and thank you for taking time to join us for our webinar, Accelerate the Start of Your Workday Student Project. My name is Lynn Hanrahan and we'll do more formal introductions in a moment. First, we do need to read our competition slide. We're required to display the slide and read this statement. Accenture is committed to full compliance with all applicable antitrust and competition laws. If you have any concern that a subject of discussion or an activity may not be appropriate, please indicate as such via the chat box and we will cease the discussion or activity. And now how this webinar will work. So we'll have introductions. We'll do about a 20-minute panel presentation and have 5 minutes for a Q&A. Our webinar is being recorded and a link and copy of the presentation will be distributed after conclusion of the webinar. Any questions that you have, please type in the text box at any time. We're going to answer those questions, as many as possible, during the Q&A. Our agenda for today is really just to touch base on why Workday Student is such a powerful tool. And we really want to share with you how to get started on the right foot to begin your Workday Student implementation. We'll share our tips from your peers, and then we'll also talk about some additional preparation and planning, and then move into the Q&A. So Workday Student, what is it? It's a modern student information system, and it empowers student, faculty, and staff. It has a user-friendly interface, including mobile, dashboards for faculty and staff to have information at their fingertips, and very flexible academic calendars with the ability to spin up new programs. And we'd like to now introduce you to our presenters. Heidi.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heidi Shoemake, and I am the Director of Academic Technology and Communications at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I have 15 years in higher ed IT, with the last 8 of those at UMMC. And the last 6 years, I've also been serving as a project manager, and currently I'm the student lead for our Workday implementation.
Hi, I'm Robin Wilson. I'm a delivery lead in Accenture's Workday higher education practice, focused on higher education Workday deployments. I have almost 8 years leading Workday implementations in higher education. Thanks for being with us today.
And I'm Lynn Hanrahan, a consultant at Accenture. My focus is on Workday Student. I've worked with Workday Student for over 6 years, and I really enjoy implementing the Workday Student product and helping schools enhance their student, faculty, and staff experience. So the business process alignment, we want to share with you what is it? What are we talking about here? Well, the business process alignment, what we'll refer to in this session, you'll hear us talk about it as the BPA, is a 6 to 8 week engagement where Accenture will lead our client project team members through a series of valuable planning activities to assess current processes and to align them with leading practice-based processes delivered within the Workday deployment. There are 4 components of the BPA. BPA planning, day in the life workshops. And the day in the life workshops are where you, as the client, walk us through how you do business today. We review practices, policies, as well as have technical strategy discussions. We then do a business process review where we confirm the business processes and sometimes look in the Workday Student software and configure a business process to say this is how it can work in the future. And then we deliver an actionable report, the BPA report. And this has both issues and opportunities identified so that you will know what are your alignment opportunities, what are the leading practice recommendations, and where can standardization happen across the university. One goal of the BPA is to establish consensus amongst administrators, faculty members, department heads, and staff. These sessions are sometimes the first time that all schools are talking about their student processes collectively at the same time. You will hear from Heidi Shoemake, who you just met, about the participants in their BPA session. And she'll talk about how it provided valuable lead time to facilitate institutional, administrative, and academic policy changes necessary to align with Workday's leading practice. The BPA report has become a living document for our clients and a guide as a pre-implementation project plan to help support the student team in working towards making the identified changes. As you can see on this slide, we're sharing a testimonial from one client with whom we worked on the BPA, and now we want to have you hear from another happy client who had a successful BPA as well. Heidi?
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone joining us today. So the University of Mississippi Medical Center is the only academic health science center in the state of Mississippi, and it plays an important part in our state and local economies. The campus community consists of around 2,200 degree-seeking students, and we have over 11,000 employees. So probably not unlike many of your institutions, we were faced with the challenge of supporting business and academic systems that were outdated and just no longer met our needs. Workday presented us with the opportunity to bring together a network of disparate systems into one modern cloud-based ecosystem. We launched our project in January of 2018 and went live with HCM payroll and the majority of finance in July of 2019. Accounts payable and supply chain management followed in April 2020, and 3 months later in June, we went live with the first of our 5-phase student implementation with the launch of recruiting and admissions. We will continue to roll out functionality from now until September 2021 with the conversion of our historical student records. So it had been about 10 years since we implemented our last student information system, and much of our leadership remembered the experience all too well. We knew we were going to be faced with challenges moving to a new system, but we were committed to doing it right. So when Accenture approached us with the opportunity to participate in a BPA, we jumped at that opportunity. We had developed workarounds and manual processes in our existing systems, and we didn't want to continue that practice. The BPA really provided us with the opportunity to look at our current operations and think about how we could leverage Workday to move our organization forward. Now, when we were considering who to involve, we really sought campus-wide stakeholder engagement. As part of our governance model, we created the Workday Education User Group. So we began by inviting members from this committee. And this group is comprised of leaders from key administrative and academic departments who have been charged with the direction and decisions related to the student module. In addition to this group, we asked them to bring in their subject matter experts from their respective departments. We also opted to include our entire technical team that would be responsible for support during the project and afterwards, as well as our technical trainers. The interest was honestly so overwhelming that there were multiple times when we had to limit attendance because we just didn't have the physical space in our meeting room. So we actually had the opportunity and the advantage to conduct our BPA sessions 6 months in advance of the start of our project because we were the last phase of the overall Workday implementation. And our meetings took place over roughly an 8-week period in time. So as part of this process, we found there were multiple advantages. First off, we were able to identify key risks before our project even began. We focused our early efforts on addressing those risks so we could mitigate or eliminate them entirely. It also gave us the opportunity to be proactive and really consider our options and make sure that we leveraged all the opportunities possible. We were able to work collaboratively as a team. Student implementations, for those of you who have been part of one, are long and they are not stress-free. And this really gave us the opportunity to get to know one another and begin building relationships among the group that would become our project team. We were able to focus on the power of one. We were coming from systems and functionality that was only loosely affiliated previously. And we were able to communicate and normalize the idea that the silos were coming down. We were going to be more integrated than we had ever been before. And that wasn't just limited to the student module. That was also going to include the HCM and finance groups in ways that we had never interacted before. The process, the BPA process, saved us really important project time as well. We were able to walk into the planning stage of our implementation with some key directions and decisions already having been made. We also, it helped the Accenture team get to know us. As our implementation partner, they were able to learn about us as individuals, our institutional culture, and any challenges that would be awaiting them on the first day. And lastly, this was a great opportunity to educate our institutional leadership about areas where we thought that we could benefit from making organizational, policy, and procedural changes, and what type of support we were going to need from them in order to be successful. So after the BPA sessions were conducted, we had a 94-page document that summarized all of our opportunities and issues that could potentially await us when we began our Workday implementation. So now what? Well, there's clearly value in the BPA process, but there's also so much value to be had in that final report, and we treated it like a living action plan. We began by sharing this plan with our Workday Project Steering Committee and utilized one of our meetings to review the plan and discuss the findings with that committee. As a student lead, this was very helpful for me because I had something to reference back to when I needed to go back to our leadership for support, decisions, or even resources. We also shared the outcome report with our academic committees. We had some early conversations, and because of those, we were able to start the project already having some approvals in place and the support that we were going to need to make some key changes. And lastly, our user group used the report as an action plan. So in the months leading up to the start of our project, we began working through the most critical and high priority areas. We examined each item and we focused on the how. How do we want these processes to work going forward? And we sought the approvals of the various committees if we needed to. So among some of our key action items, the first one really was the opportunity for us to standardize our processes whenever possible. Historically, we had a large number of manual processes that occurred outside of our student system, most commonly involving Excel spreadsheets and Outlook calendar appointments and communications. So we took the opportunity during the BPA to look at these processes and where we could leverage Workday functionality to move to a more standardized and automated platform. Academic calendar was both an issue and an opportunity for us. Now, the issue was that we said we had one calendar on paper, but in reality, we had many more. So through the process, we were really able to highlight the opportunities for us as an organization to moving to a multiple calendar format and investigate what would happen if we tried to continue staying on that one calendar. Now, coming from an IT background and having been part of the implementation team when we implemented our current SIS, I knew that there was going to be challenges related to conversion. And the BPA confirmed that for me. There were this was largely going to be caused by our technical limitations of our current system, but some of the complexity of our academic programs were going to present a challenge as well. So we were able to take this opportunity because it was identified as a critical issue with a high risk. I was able to justify hiring a highly skilled developer that would help with the technical aspects, and it also helped our functional team direct some of their focus before the start of our project to cleaning up our data and minimizing some of those challenges we expected to face. We also had a number of academic policies where we knew we were going to be able to benefit from standardization, and we needed to really investigate these. Enrollment load, academic standing, and course repeat policies were among some of the ones that required most attention. Now, degree audit was a really easy win for us because we don't have an electronic degree audit system right now. So the BPA process helped us prepare for what type of materials we were going to need to gather and how we would transition from a paper to an electronic process using the academic requirements in Workday. And lastly, financial aid is one area where we probably had some of the highest risk and some of the greatest opportunities all in one. Our current system is currently highly manual, has no automation, and there are no features such as automatic repackaging for enrollment changes. So moving to Workday is really going to present our administrators and our students with a much better student experience. But we knew there was going to be a risk because of the maturity of the financial aid module. And the BPA process helped us identify what some of those specific risks areas were going to be. And that was really tied for us to the maturity of the existing financial aid functionality. Now, there have been multiple releases since we started our project, but we were prepared that if those features were not delivered, we had other workarounds in place until it was able to be made part of the Workday platform. So I'd like to leave you today with some recommendations and some key takeaways. First off, I'd recommend setting very clear expectations from the beginning. It's important to make sure your participants are aware of both what they should and should not expect from a BPA session. This was an opportunity to really dive into the details of our business processes and policies, but it wasn't intended to provide any Workday demos or serve as a training opportunity. This communication to our customers was really a valuable step that we were able to take to make sure that we had the right people in the room. Securing executive leadership support early is really important as well. For UMMC, this was a really significant time commitment. In any given session, we had probably 20, if not 40 or more people sitting in the room, and that included deans and directors and managers among staff as well. So we needed to be sure that our leadership found enough value in this process that they would free us up and give us the time that we needed to be able to participate. I'd also recommend casting a very wide net when you identify your stakeholders for inclusion in these sessions. Just as important as it is to have the decision makers in the room, it's also important that you have the staff members there that really know how your processes work. One area where I will say we did miss the mark was we didn't include HCM and finance resources in our discussions nearly enough. It wasn't until we were really into our project that we saw the full extent of how many touch points there were between the different modules and how much we could have benefited from some more in-depth early discussions. So if you have the opportunity, I would send some invites to those folks as well. And lastly, use the BPA outcome report as a living document. It is designed to be a map to get your organization where it wants to be in the future. Now, I won't sit here today and say that we got through every single item on the report, but we absolutely were able to tackle all of the critical and high impact areas before our project really even got started. So for me, UMMC's business process was a really important step in reaching a goal that I had for us. And that was in the future, if we were ever asked why we were doing something a certain way, we would never again have to say it's because it's how we've always done it. So I want to thank everyone for allowing me the time to share UMMC's BPA journey with you. And I'd like to pass it at this time over to Robin Wilson to discuss SmartPack.
Thanks, Heidi. And thanks to all of you again for joining us today. So like Workday continues to evolve the student product and also improve their student deployment approach, we here at Accenture also are focused on and are striving to continue to improve our delivery approach, and that is with creating accelerators that provide more value to you with our services. So just like Heidi was just mentioning, essentially the BPA is a jumpstart from the functional area. Well, our Smart Pack is also, it jumpstarts the deployment from a project management perspective. So I call it the Deployment Readiness Accelerator. So the Smart Pack was really created from our lessons learned, honestly, from working with our clients throughout the deployments, but also from listening to the client's feedback. The Smart Pack's vision is really, it's an organized approach to prepare the project structure. It's really key to build this from a project management perspective. It's really key to build this foundation so that will allow the team to hit the ground running when it's time for the deployment. So as you can see from this visual, the Smart Pack, we have 6 focus points. And it's really, it's at the start, right? Heidi mentioned, I think it was number 2, Heidi, that, you know, that executive leadership. So that's the first thing we want to do, is we want to work with you building out that governance structure, defining those escalation paths, the communication plan that we're going to use throughout the deployment. It's very key. And then our next focus point is resource planning. You know, it's working with you to really understand, or there are going to be some resource constraints through the deployment. So with our commitment heat map, we'll have those discussions with you, defining those roles and the responsibilities. And so we'll identify very early on, are there going to be some constraints that we'll need to address? And you know, at this point, you're probably live in production, most of you, with Workday, and so you know the importance of change management and organizational readiness. So we want to start those discussions very early as well, and it's even more important with student, because we know that that's the core. That's the core of higher education institutions. So we'll start very early on as far as identifying those stakeholders and starting up that. The stakeholder analysis. And then another point, the light blue point, the Workday methodology. Again, you may have already experienced the Workday methodology with your phase 1, but as we like to say, student is different, right? So Workday has a very detailed approach when it comes to the student deployments. So we're going to want to take that time as well to educate you on the student deployment approach and the differences that you'll experience from what you would have experienced with your phase 1 implementation. And then you also heard Heidi, I think it was number 4, Heidi, about the lessons learned with HCM and financials. So we're also going to spend some time as far as having discussions about the organizational touch points that we're going to have with the student deployment. So that's very key as well. And then of course, technical environment. We call this the jump start with this from the technical perspective, because we're going to go ahead and get you started in having those conversations about the vendor communications that are going to need to take place, going ahead and defining those reporting inventories and integrations inventory. And then also the last focus point is Workday training. I think probably in the top 3 of things that from a project manager perspective you always get asked about very early on is the training for the project team. So what we're going to do with you in this perspective, with this focus point, is to work with you in creating that project plan for everyone on the project team. So we have it where we'll explain and we'll plan accordingly for each role on the project, who needs to take what and by when that we think that training should take place. So in summary, Accenture Smart Pack Accelerator tool, as I called it again, the Deployment Readiness Accelerator, it was really designed to jumpstart your student deployment and complement the plan stage. So it's really setting up that project structure so that once Lynn and team complete that BPA, that business alignment, the business process alignment phase, we'll be able to hit the ground running with the deployment phase. Thanks again for joining us today. Lynn?
Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Heidi. We want to open it up now for Q&A, and I know we've received a few questions. So Heidi, if you're ready, I have a number of questions for you. The first question: did the academic committees participate in creating the BPA and developing the action items changes? How many faculty and at what level of engagement?
Sure, that's a great question. So we did have members of the academic committee participating in the BPAs. Those individuals were predominantly the academic deans for each school who are also teaching faculty members in their respective schools. So we have 6 schools, so at any point in time we had about 6 to 8 faculty members attending a session. And now these folks do have a bit of a foot in the academic teaching world as well as the administrative world. So they were involved in more of the discussions than just specifically the faculty experience. They did have direct input, and kind of the way the BPAs worked was, Accenture came in with a series of questions for us about how we do our business processes, and we allowed all of the faculty to talk from the perspective of their schools, especially in areas that pertain to policies such as grading, the registration process, how they validate students for graduation eligibility. So they were definitely involved pretty heavily from the beginning.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. The next one, you mentioned that this report helped educate leadership. What roles or who is on your Workday Student Steering Committee?
Sure. So we have a multi-tiered steering committee. So at the highest level of our organization, they're really focused on the entire Workday ecosystem. And that's what I typically refer to as our C-suite. It's our chief HCM officer, our chief institutional research officer, chief finance officer, our chief information, our chief CIOs. And then down to the next level was the Workday Education User Group. And this was the group that consisted of the academic deans from the school, academic affairs, student affairs, IT, and then the key administrative offices as well, financial aid, student accounting, enrollment management. So there were those 2 different levels, and the Workday User Group was really focused strictly on the student module, with the larger steering committee focused on the entire ecosystem.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. A follow on to the academic committee and your answer on faculty, a question about were there any examples of pushback from faculty and how to mitigate any risks due to their resistance to change?
So I wouldn't say that I had specific examples of things that the faculty were fearful, but like any of us, there's fear in the unknown. So from the very beginning, we launched very open, transparent campaigns to let everyone on the campus know what to expect. There is going to be a lot of change for our faculty members because a lot of their ways of interacting with our students and our key offices will be changing as we move into the Workday Student. So we first off started a group called the Change Ambassadors, and these were people who were particularly interested in what was happening with the Workday project, and we invited them to attend bi-monthly meetings to see early demos, ask questions, and then they were able to communicate out to the campus some of what they could expect. We also did pop-up booths all over campus when we were still allowed to be in person and brought cookies. The cookies helped, and called What's New with Workday or What's Coming with Workday. And we shared demos all across campus of what the new system was going to look like. And then also we asked if we could come and do visitations at different committees. So we went with the Student Affairs Committee, Academic Affairs Committee, and ensured that they were engaged and any of their concerns were heard early. And if they did get feedback about things that their faculty were fearful of, they brought it to our group, and we tried to address it in other campaigns through email and through digital signage.
Thanks, Heidi. One other question. I think we're almost at time, but this is not necessarily related to the BPA, but a really great question. And congratulations on your go live in June on recruiting and admissions at an academic medical center and a research one. The question really is how, you went live on student recruiting and admissions during the height of COVID. How did UMMC handle that?
Yeah, we certainly did. We actually got the shelter in place notice on the Thursday of the first week of our end-to-end testing in preparation for go live. So in one weekend, we had to shift from being on-site, in-person, meeting together with our Accenture partners to being completely remote. So what we did was quickly created series of webinars where we could get together virtually, took advantage of a lot of our technology such as OneDrive, where we were able to share materials with one another, and really tried to replicate the in-person process as much as possible, utilizing your webinar opportunities such as this one. And then we created virtual question and answer sessions, virtual support opportunities with Ask the Expert and virtual office hours for folks that had questions when we did go live. So we tried to be as present as possible, even if it was only virtually.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Robin. And thank you to all of you who have joined. We want to share with you our three other live events. Specifically, we have one tomorrow featuring Colby College and Georgia Tech on technology in the workforce of the future. So please join us for that. There's information in the chat about it. And then we have our two other webinars following up on Workday Student on the 12th. We'll have Indian River State College, and we'll be talking about data cleanup, conversion reporting, and then going live in a social media world on November 19th. So thank you all for sharing your time today. We look forward to seeing you. Please join our webinar tomorrow. And again, we'll be sending out the recording link to this as well. Thank you all.